there's hope for tomorrow, we must first embark on the darkest hour.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to The Darkest Hour. I'm your host, Amanda Jane. Tonight is the first episode of our second season. And I promise, these stories will leave you feeling anything but warm and fuzzy. Sometimes the hardest part of experiencing the paranormal or the unexplained is the lack of validation. You find yourself wondering, or even sure, in some cases, that you saw something. But what do you do with that information? Do you eventually write off the experience until it slowly leaves your mind? Why do we always seem to be alone when we experience the worst things, the scariest things? I can't answer that question, but I can say that tonight's stories come from individuals who cannot leave their experiences alone. And I imagine they won't be leaving anyone else's mind anytime soon either. So, let's get started, shall we? When I was in kindergarten, a woman almost hit me with her car. And when she realized that she hadn't, she picked me up and put me in her car. I'd only been alone for a second, standing outside the general store, near our apartment. I was told to stay inside the store, but I'd seen a sticker. It was on the ground, just outside the door. It was a pink flower with a yellow smiley face as the center. I'd reached out to grab it, being sure to keep both of my feet inside. But the wind took the sticker further away, but not too far. So I stepped forward. I was on the sidewalk, but I was fine. So I went a bit further. It looked like the wind was about to take it away for good, so I dove even further. But now I was off of the curb, in the street, and face to face with a small blue car. I turned towards the store. I didn't see my mom or hear that I was in trouble. So I put my feet on the curb and I picked up the sticker. When I looked up, there was a lady. She was standing next to the car. She was just looking at me with a blank stare. I don't know how long I stared back, but for a while, I didn't say anything, and she didn't say anything either. So I turned and I started to walk back to the store. I heard the lady say, "Hey, little girl, is this yours?" I turned around, not sure what she had in her hand. I had my sticker, but I walked closer. Perhaps it was another sticker. I stood there, trying to see what it was she had in her hand. She looked around, almost frantically, and then she picked me up, put me in the back seat of her car. I remember not being afraid at first, because I didn't think that she was going to take me. I thought at most I was in trouble for being in the street. I didn't know why she had played that little game to get me in here, but I played along, and I asked the lady, what was in her hand. Was it another sticker, like this one? But the woman wasn't talking to me or looking at me anymore. I decided to get out of the car, but I couldn't because the doors had been locked. I scooted across the way to the other door, but it was locked too. Then, my mother, in the store's doorway, looking for me. So I pounded on the lady's window, yelling for my mom. She made eye contact with me, and it was when I saw the fear in my mother's eyes that I was truly terrified. The car was moving, and I began crying immediately. I stood on the seat and I turned around, looking out the window. The general store and my mother were becoming further and further away from me. The majority of this drive was me crying and screaming, I'm sure. I remember that the lady didn't respond to what I was saying most of the time. She would be talking, but nothing she was saying made sense, at least not to me. She wasn't being mean to me, but somehow she was scaring me. There was a moment that I stopped crying, just enough to ask her to please take me home. And I asked about my mommy, and she did respond, telling me that I had no mommy, that there was no mommy. I knew this wasn't true, and the idea of it scared me. So I was back to crying once again in this strange woman's car. She stopped the car. I looked up, but we were nowhere. There were no houses, no stores, only a few cars. We weren't near anything that I recognized, just factory buildings or Costco-style buildings. I'd never seen this place before, and I didn't want to stop here. I noticed that the lady started to get agitated, acting like no adult I'd ever seen, scratching herself. I thought that she was angry because she was punching her steering wheel and saying stuff, swearing. But then she just started to cry, and then sobbing. For some reason, I wanted to comfort this lady. So when she looked at me, crying, saying sorry over and over again, I just told her that it was okay. I told her not to be sad. I told her that I was sad too, but that it was okay, that my mommy could help us both. She did that thing where she looked around frantically again, and the car was moving again. The lady was still crying and driving rather unsafe. I could tell because others were honking at her car. I eventually asked if we were going home, and did she know where I lived? No response. I started to feel sad again, like this lady wasn't going to take me home. All I could think was that I would never see my mom again. Tears filled my eyes, and then police sirens filled my ears. We were being chased, I guess. I held onto the door. I reached for the seatbelt, but I couldn't get it on. The lady, now in full hysterics, must have decided to pull over. I don't remember how long this chase or drive was, but I could feel the car slowing down, and then it stopped. Cops surrounded the vehicle, yelling so many things. I just laid on the back seat. I felt a hand, and it was an officer. They were reaching for my hand. And then they said my name and asked if they could take me back to my mommy. I grabbed the officer's hand, and I got in the patrol car. And really, the next thing I recall is waking up on my mom's lap on the living room couch. It would be years before I got details on this. For a while, I think my mom hoped that I would forget. I understand why she'd hope that, but Unfortunately, you don't forget something like that. The woman was either a drug addict or had some sort of mental illness. At least that's what my mom assumed. She decided to press charges against the woman for kidnapping and really any other child endangerment charge that she could find. My mom says that if the woman had been just suffering from mental illness, that would have been apparent when she showed up in court. She would have been ill. But clearly, she had just been sobered up at the court hearing, my mom thought. My mom also said the place where she took me was most likely the Denton district, which was a spot dedicated to apparently a lot of bad shit that was happening in that town. But yeah, the real reason she pressed charges was because she feared the worst, that this lady was going to somehow use me to get something that she needed that day, whether it was for human trafficking or something else. My mom couldn't have that lady running around hurting kids. She just couldn't let there be a next time. A few years ago, I was lying in my bed trying to sleep for the night. I remember the glow of the moonlight coming through the window and the sound of music coming out of my stereo. The stereo is one that was given to me by my grandma before she passed. I've had it for as long as I can remember, because she passed away when I was only 3. I sit it next to my guitar amp on my shelf and I leave it on all day, changing the channels with my mood. Every night, I would listen to the public radio that was broadcast from the university not far away. They played everything. Classical, jazz, Motown. It was more of an oldie station than anything else. One of the most calming parts was the host. She sounded like she was no more than 25. I figured she was a university student that did the radio station for the night. She had a strangely calming voice that sounded almost like a mother calming her child.
Now we return to music through the night. Enjoy,
she would say after the commercials were over. The sound of violins and cellos slowly faded in, and not long after it had built up into an entire symphony. I laid there, eyes closed, calmly listening to the music, when a particular scent washed over me. It was the smell of a woman's perfume. I thought it to be strange because I lived on the other end of the house from anyone who owned perfume. It was a pleasing smell. It had a unique citrusy scent with hints of lemon and orange, while still remaining feminine in nature. Brushing it off is my imagination. I closed my eyes to try to sleep again when I felt the gentle touch of a hand resting on my head, slowly running its fingers through my hair in a loving manner. I smiled and thought it was my girlfriend coming to bed. I opened my eyes slowly to see the female figure sitting next to me in the bed. She was wearing the perfume and still playing with my hair. Looks like you finally decided to come to bed. Did you finish your TV show? I asked, still thinking it was my girlfriend. The figure then kissed my forehead, and I fell asleep. I woke up in the bed alone, and the smell of perfume was gone. Confused, I went into the living room, only to see my girlfriend on the couch asleep, with the Netflix log-on screen still on the TV. I just shrugged it off as a dream. Fast forward a week or two, when I was helping my aunt clean out her house for moving. I was carefully placing all of her perfumes into a box smelling each of them as I put it away. In the very back, buried behind all the other fragrances, I spotted a small green bottle. I picked it up and sprayed a little on my wrist and smelled it. It was the same perfume I had smelled in my dream. Intrigued, I took the bottle to my aunt and I asked her, "Do you know anything about this? It smells familiar." "Oh yes, I do. Your grandma, she used to wear that all the time. It was her favorite." There's something in Arizona. I'm a long-haul truck driver, so I'm no stranger to the States. And I've seen things that I can't explain. But this is by far the weirdest thing to ever happen to me. So I was driving through Arizona, heading westbound on I-40. I had finally hit Flagstaff, so I got out at a truck stop and handled my business. As I left from Flagstaff, I ran by mile marker 185. It's about 10 miles from Flagstaff, Arizona. As I passed mile marker 185, there was what seemed to be a person hitchhiking. The only problem was that this guy was huge, like 8 feet tall, looking straight into the passenger window of my semi-truck. On top of that, it seemed to be as wide as the truck, from shoulder to shoulder. I passed the hitchhiker at 70 miles an hour, or so I thought. About halfway down the road, I saw the same exact person or thing. Once again, I passed it, and then again and again. This kept happening even 20 miles down the road to mile marker 165. I saw it every few miles. After I passed mile marker 165, I didn't see it anymore, so I thought I was done with it. But I was dead wrong. I got down to mile marker 145 and had to take a leak. So I pulled over on the side of the road to handle my business. I was about halfway done when I heard an ear-piercing scream, mixed between what sounded like a deer and a human. As soon as I heard it, I started looking around, and just outside the halo of my headlights, I saw it. I was never more confused and scared in my life. I tried to figure out what it was when I heard something flying through the air. Suddenly, I heard a thump, thump. And sitting 3 feet away from me was a huge rock, like the size of a basketball. It had to be at least 80 pounds. And that thing threw it at me, and it landed just 3 feet away. I wasted no time trying to hop back in the truck and get away from whatever that thing was. As I passed it, it just stared me down, and I never saw it again. So, can someone tell me what I saw? Well, friends, that's all the scares for tonight's episode. Stick around to check out the latest single, Empty Well, from my band, Forget Me Not. You can learn more about us at conductedbyforgetmenot.com, Spotify, YouTube, all that good stuff. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the Darkest Hour YouTube channel. It means more than you could ever know. And if you have stories like these, I'd love to share them. Send them to me, amandadarkesthour@gmail.com, or join the Darkest Hour YT subreddit to share your experience with the community. As always, thank you everyone for listening, and stay spooky. Here's Forget-Me-Not's latest single, Empty Well.
Take you there, leave the feeling of having felt. You're throwing wishes in an empty well. Heal your wounds in the riverbed. Follow my voice, I can take you there. Leave the feeling of having felt. You're throwing wishes in an empty well.
Covering my glasses like the lightning bolts that I'm catching in a bottle with the green. It's electric, I'm corrupting all the static through the cracks and finding secrets in the frequencies. And I can show you how to get the guts to come out, 'cause it sure beats being alone. And I can show you how to get the guts to come out, 'cause it sure beats being alone. Yeah.
Take you there, leave the feeling of having felt. You're throwing wishes in an empty well. Heal your wounds in the riverbed. Follow my voice, I can take you there. Leave the feeling of having felt. You're throwing wishes in an empty well.
The one you wanna start with, I spit raised ones that I'm barking. I protect myself with certainty. Yeah, I'm that dog causing problems, charging at the fencing yard that I'm guarding round my neck.